if you're going to rent a car, ask them what it is per pound per mile to do a test day.
Yeah.
What do you charge me just to take the car to track?
If you talk to a very well-prepared team, they know that number.
Le Mans, Aston Martin GT3, I think some years ago when I spoke to a team about that, and the figure that sticks in my head, it was £700 a mile. That puts it into perspective.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Car Chat podcast. I'm Sam Moores, and with me this week we have Colin Hoad. Hello.
Hello, Sam.
Hi. I'm going to say welcome back to the podcast. If you
Thank you.
have not come across Colin before, I'm going to ask him in a second to sort of tell you a little bit about who he is and what he does. But we have done an earlier podcast. It was a few years ago, all about him, and we were just discussing how much time we should block out for this podcast. And I think last time I was like, it's going to between 1 and 2. That's like just what they normally come out at, and we were still going at like 3.5. Like, cut. So for the people that have not come across you, Colin, can you tell the listeners a little bit about like who you are and what you do?
Okay, my name's Colin, and I provide driver training services to the motor industry, people who want to, clients who'd like to advance their road driving, track driving and motor racing. I started cat driver training now 20 years ago with my wife Jo. I'm the director and founder, and we employ 4 instructors, including myself, Jo and Lynn in the office, and have been running a successful business for 20 years.
Yeah. I came and did some driver training with you, which was a lot of fun. And I think I don't remember whether we'd done the podcast before. I think we'd done the podcast before I came and did some driving. And one of the things, like, I've had quite a few different driver coaches, and I think something I'm slowly learning is you actually pick up what you need at the time from the person you're with. So sometimes you're like, this person I got much more out of. And you're like, well, when you first get in a car, you probably just need, this is the seating position. You don't need the finer balance of like what the tire's doing. But I really liked, you very much have a process for teaching. And that for me was a huge part of why I enjoyed it a lot of it. But about, I don't even know what it was now, 6 months ago.
Yes.
You came out with a book. Oh no, it was longer than that. It was September 23. And you got in touch and said, hey, Sam, I've got this book. You can have a look, have a read. You sent me one. Thanks. And it's called How to Start Racing. Now, I've not really come across any media with this sort of title or genre. How did this come about? And I guess what was the idea behind this book?
Okay. I'll take a step back a little. I wrote a book, Your Track Day Guide, around 4 years ago, and that has sold exceptionally well. So there's 2 reasons to write them. First one, I've got a lot in my head over many years of being in the motor industry via vehicle preparation, racing myself, then getting into coaching and training, and then seeing people on a regular basis start their journey of track day driving or racing. And then I realised after many years that I've probably got a lot just sitting in my head that might be of use to people. Often questions that people ask on training days, that becomes a bit of a, if you like, a log for the things that you can write about. And also then COVID came along, and I'm a bit of a fidget. I've got a lot of energy, and I didn't want to just sit there wasting my days. I did spend a few days out in the garden like we all did, but then I thought I need to get on with something. So I wrote the book, Your Track Day Guide, and that sold well. The second reason for doing it, we like to give back. Jo and I are conscious of that. So all the proceeds of both of these books go to Mission Motorsport.
Oh, nice.
Which is a fantastic charity. And like any charity, they need as much help as they can get. And as you're probably aware, they're at the forefront of using motorsport as a therapy for people to recover from, or just leave the services and then start a new life, or recover from, for some people, what are, mentally challenging situations they've been in and significant outcomes, losing limbs, etc. So that was really the sort of feet on the ground thought. I thought, what can I do with this? Let's without meaning to sound, obviously we can all do with some money in the bank, but I thought I'm never going to be a millionaire on the sales of this book. But, if it reaches a few £1,000s as it has done over the years, then that's a good chunk of money to go to Mission Motorsport. So that was some of the reason. And then I got to the racing book. So I wrote the track day guide, your track day guide, and then realised I had a similar amount of information in my head about racing. So I did for track days. And that was the impetus to get going. They take a long time. I'm not an author, so I can honestly say that you read a chapter or you write a chapter and then you read it again 2 days later and think that's really not very good. I'm going to write that again. And I think without exaggerating, I think I wrote each chapter 3 or 4 times before I was happy with it. And then I gave it to Joe and a professional proofreader to actually turn it into a book. I didn't need, Joe could do all that, but we've got a friend who's a professional proofreader, and I thought, well, let's just get another handle on this. And then Joe finished it all off. So it was, in effect, quite a labour of love. You don't realise until you start these things how long they take.
Yeah.
But in terms of content, then there is lots in there, again, that customers have asked us that I wanted to really get into the detail. And one of those examples I can give you that's in the book is I had a customer came to me some years ago, and they came for coaching, and as we did, we sit and have coffees and lunch and chat. And this gentleman said, I really wish I hadn't joined this particular championship because I qualify on the Saturday, normally early morning to late morning, and then I don't race till the Sunday, and I've got my children with me. And then I thought, that is potentially something that people might want to know about. I also have, and this is quite frequent because we do teach significant amounts of people with in the coaching academies, and a guy came to me really forlorn and a bit down. He booked his training and he said he was coming to advance his skills for racing in the coaching. And when he got to me, he said, I can't believe the speed of my competitors. He said, I thought we were all supposed to be rookies. Yeah. So, you might have a motocross champion, a motorcycle champion. You've got people in other rallying, people that have done karting. 40 track days in an academy car they bought before theirs arrives for 2 years. And I thought some of this needs to be put on paper and just help people out. So there you go. That was the impetus. And the time element was COVID, gave me time to do it.
Yeah. No, it was, I had a look through, and there is so much stuff in there. There's so much stuff that you wouldn't think about until, like, I look at a lot of it and go like, oh yeah, that's useful. But, I've done a bit of racing now, and you sort of, these things eventually come up. But I very much was like, there's so much stuff I wish I'd thought about before for all of these reasons. And the way I thought we'd structure this podcast is, I've sort of picked out a few things, not necessarily specific chapters in there, but to discuss with you. And then I heavily recommend anyone that's either, if you're interested in racing or thinking about racing, just get the book. It's not expensive. Just get it. And there's so much stuff that you will come out and go, I didn't even think about that. And that alone is worth, because it's so easy to spend money in racing and cars and waste money or crash money, however you want to end up doing it, that as much preparation as you can do before, I would heavily recommend. So I just sort of go, one of the titles I'd like to look into is, before you are thinking about racing, or if you're thinking about, going down that route, you'd like to do some, are there any minimum driver skill requirements or sort of amount of experience or anything you think someone should have?
That's, again, a very good question. I think that I'm going to come back to with a coaching hat on to answer that. I think it often depends on the client's perception of their skills.
Okay.
So if people come for training, what we always say is they're looking to raise their training skill to a higher level. And often, as you did when we came in, we're sitting with people almost as a mandate. We sit there and ask them, what are your objectives and what skill experience have you had before? And then what I've realised over the years is it's very difficult to contextualize somebody's phrasing and description of their history and what they do, because their understanding of speed in a fast lap could be quite a slow lap in relation to a racing lap.
Yeah.
It could be a very fast lap and actually on point, and actually people can drive somewhere near the optimum lap for the car they're in. But once you start talking to people about their desire to go racing, what you realise is it's a blank sheet of paper. So I don't want to overcomplicate it. I think when people go racing, they don't fully appreciate the level of commitment that is required to achieve a competitive lap in whatever you drive, from a C1 to a GT3 car. So I think that's often the first challenge for people, is to understand that. And I think there's often a dawning and an awakening once you get in your car and start driving around a track. You start to realise where you sit in that bandwidth. And that for some people is, oh, okay, I'm 2 seconds off the pace. For others, it's, crikey, I'm 12 seconds off the pace. And that, if we go back to the question, that often relates to the experience that people have had prior to entering motorsport. I've trained over 3,000 people now, just over 3,000 people. That's a good number.
That's a lot.
I know there's an official number there that I can confidently quote. And what you start to see, and what I've realised, is nobody, in those 3,000 people, I've had 2 people that have aced it. And I thought, wow, you've got something really special. And one, I'm never going to talk names, but it was some years ago, a gentleman came in a Lotus Elise. He was a lawyer. He was 45 years old. And I got on the handling circuit with him. And I thought, oh, this is a bit fast. You've told me you've never done a track day. This is your first performance car. And I'm now in survival mode for both of us in car, thinking, let's just slow this down a little. And then starting to discuss how to build speed safely. And then it dawned on me, after not too many laps, that this guy was just flying around in complete control and very happy to do it. And then my anxiety started to reduce. And I said, are you sure about this? You've never driven around a track before? He said, Colin, never been on a track ever, never had a sports car. And I thought, you've got something very special. And then there was another young lad who raced karts that came and was about to start racing Caterhams, and he was on a similar page. So once those 2 people are now talked about, in the 3,000 people, we all have to work hard at it. Yeah. That's my firm belief. There's very few people that just jump in the car and then go quickly. So once you've got that in your head, then you're starting to then build people's knowledge and speed and how they're going to drive quickly and safely on track. I just paused there, Sam. I've lost my thread a little bit there, mate. What? Can you just repeat the question for me?
Yes. It was. Is there sort of like a minimum driver standard or set of skills or ability before you sort of actually commit to, I'm going to do a race?
So what I've realised over the years is that you have to help people begin that journey into motorsport from their starting point, whatever their perception of their skill set is, and they're in our understanding once we get in the car with them. And what I've realised over the years, that there's many facets to that. So if you've got somebody that's taken advanced driving and they're a ROSPA Gold and they hold the ROSPA Gold Award for advanced driving on the road, what you realise is they'll be quite processed with their observation, their cornering process. But for example, driving on the public highway and taking advanced driving lessons, it's all based around roadcraft, the police handbook, which absolutely dictates that you shouldn't trail brake into a corner.
Right.
There should be no control overlap. You brake in a straight line, back on the gas, then you steer into the turn. Now, as we know, or your listeners may not be aware, and I'll cover it in a degree of detail for them if they don't, that produces understeer in a corner, because once you brake in a straight line and get on the gas, you lift the nose of the car up. So you'll have traction, but when you power on, you're going to get the nose pushing. So when we start to drive on track, then you want to trail brake. You want to finish a percentage of your braking into the turn, overlapping the braking and the steering, which is a formidable skill for driving on circuit. So what you'll see is the advanced driver on the road will put in a very tidy lap, a safe lap, pass their arts test quite capably, and then realise that they need to advance their skills into some kind of track focus technique like trail braking to get the lap time. You could have somebody that's just a car enthusiast but has got a lot of knowledge, done a lot of reading, a lot of YouTube, and understands all the theory but hasn't had the practice.
Yeah.
And quite often those people are easy to work with because you can just mould them into what they need because they've got a good set of background knowledge to advance. And then you get people that have been doing track days for years and decided to take the jump. They might have been driving at 90%, enjoying their performance cars, but never driven at 100%. So the question, it really opens up a big variation, a bit of a rainbow of different colours of driving technique that we feel that you can, once you come through the door, we can start developing in the areas you need to go quicker. I think more important than the driving skill is the intent, the actual intention of going fast in a car. And that, I believe, is the override. If you've got somebody that isn't quite sure about this, not sure if I want to do it, but drive very well, as you're aware, once you get into a race scenario, I always say you've really got to want to do it, haven't you? Because once you get in the car and you're sitting on the start line, you know, even when you're experienced, it can be quite nerve-wracking.
Quite stressful.
Yes. So if the intent is there, I think that's probably sits higher up the ladder than maybe driving skill. We can build this.
Yeah.
And a skill set, what is a skill set? It's a perception of skill for both us as the instructor coach when you come in and the person that's coming in, the client. You've got to find a way to meet in the middle to develop the speed. But if someone comes in and says, well, I've bought a race car and I'd like to do a couple of races and I'm not sure if I want to do it yet, but my friends have talked me into it and I'm going to get going, then that's a very different, perhaps, day out compared to the person that says, I've signed up for this championship, I've done 20 track days, I'm absolutely focused on winning and moving forward up the grid, I don't want to finish last. How can you help me go quicker? And then you can see the person's got the intent. So, yeah, the motivation and the intent to succeed. And then I think you also need, you need to be very curious about what you're about to get into, because a lot of information and a lot of challenging psychological scenarios you're going to be involved in that you need to manage. So I think you need to be open to change and curious to advancing. It's just a never-ending, I see it as a never-ending progression.
Yeah.
I think we touched on this on the last podcast. I call it's very cheesy. I call it climbing the steps of Grip Mountain, because you think, oh, I'm nearly at the top. And then you just open a door and there's a crack in the door and then you're in another room with a lot more information. You don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
So I think I can put some coaching thoughts to that. If you study NLP, Neuro-Linguistic Programming, it's a coaching tool and a business tool. And then you'll hear 4 phases in NLP. We speak of being unconsciously incompetent. So you don't know that you need to advance or you're doing something wrong. Then you become consciously incompetent. Right, I know I'm not doing this right. I need to find ways to do it better. And then you take coaching or training. So you become consciously competent. Right, I'm doing this, but I've got to think about it. And then you become unconsciously competent, which is the place you want to be at, where you're working in flow state and your brain is quite happy because you've done lots of repetition, you've learned the subject, you've got the intent to go quick, and you're in flow state. And then in my early days of coaching, I thought, well, I'm now unconsciously competent. I've got there. I've done it. And then you think, right, how am I going to take another 3/10 off this lap? You kind of start back at the beginning again.
Yeah.
Because now I need to go 3/10 quicker and I'm not sure how to do it. So now I start off being unconsciously incompetent because I think, well, I don't even know, I need to go quicker. Then I look at a series of lap times competitors and think, oh, I'm half a second 3/10 off or a second off, 2 seconds off. How am I going to do that? So you start back at the beginning and work your way. So I think the intent to go quick and be curious is something that you evolve into, and the successful people remain curious.
Yeah.
And they want to go faster and faster. I do study racing. I'm a real geek with this for my job and just my interest. But you'll even, I watched a YouTube, Aston Martin, Fernando Alonso in the sim just before the start of this season, talking about, I don't think he used the word curious, but he was talking about you've always got to be searching out the next fast line, the next advancement in the car. And I thought, you know, that guy's, we all know how long he's been doing it, and he's still curious to go fast. So I think it's not just about driving if you want to race. It's about your mental fitness, your intention, your curiosity to improve, and then a myriad of other small things that we could look at in terms of hydration, diet. If you want to get to the front of any championship in the UK, I think these are considerations. Not everybody's going to do that, But I do believe you give yourself a much better chance of succeeding if you look at it sort of organically.
Yeah.
But of course, it starts with the driving. Yeah.
Yeah. There's so you've brought up so many points there that like resonate. I remember I've definitely been through, and I'm in the middle of. When I first started, you're like, in my head, I know a certain amount about driving, and then you start doing laps, and you basically get to a lap time, whatever it might be. It might be 10 seconds off. It's unlikely to be 1 second off if you're at this point. But I learned very quickly that I couldn't then just go faster. It was like, if someone said, yeah, but just go faster, you're like, no, I can't try harder and go faster. I have there is a gap in my knowledge. I don't know how to go faster. And I'd often come across people, and you come across, I'd say, different people that react to this scenario differently. For me, I'd sort of be like, okay, I'll try and push it. And then you realize that like, you're not necessarily going faster, and kind of go, I need to learn something or go away and like find out how to go faster. And then I've come across other people who just go, well, I'm just going to go faster. I'm just going to brake later. I'm just going to get on the gas earlier, whatever. I'm just going to carry more, whatever it is. And then they end up having quite large accidents.
Yes. Yes, that is often the consequence. Yeah.
And then I guess each person will know where their psychology is. Because like for me, I get scared at a certain point. And I think that's probably a huge part that holds me back of going, I'm not sure like how to push this without it. Like what's going to be the reaction if I push this a bit further, maybe in the wet or whatever it is, you know. And that's a huge one for me. And we've talked about this before. One of the things that I think came up in all of this preparation, and I think is a good question, is how do you decide which car and / series, because they're always linked. And I think this circles back to what we've just been talking about. And what's your opinion on that and thoughts?
I think you should be realistic and honest about your skill set and what you want to achieve personally. And then one of the key factors is budget. And that was part of the motivation for writing the book. So you can go down a rabbit hole and spend a lot of money and perhaps not be enjoying yourself any more than the person that's driving in a car that's more simplistic, with less options to change and not such a sticky tyre. And quite often those people are having equally as much fun as somebody in a slick shod machine with lots of horsepower and aero. So I think you need to be honest with your skill set. What can I achieve with the skills that I've got? And what am I prepared to invest in myself to advance? So that's for me one of the starting points. I think you also need to be realistic. All the things that people tend not to think about. You know, if you're going to take your family and your children to motorsport with the weekends, who do you want to be involved? You know, how big is your entourage, and are they coming every weekend? And do they want to get involved? So I think in order to make it a pleasant experience for everybody, I think you probably need to consider who's coming with you, the time that they can commit. Even if, for example, if you decide to go race a KA in endurance race and you need somebody to help you refuel, you need somebody to, be changing brake pads maybe and doing things on the car when you're not perhaps in a position to do it. Yeah. So I think if we start looking at some of the classes that require lots of time and people, then that might not fit the budget. If you're looking at classes, depending on whether it's BRSCC or HRDC, all these different providers of racing have their standard circuits. Now, some racing is in Knock Hill for one championship, all the way down to Brands Hatch. Other championships wouldn't include Knock Hill. Yeah. And they're more central, perhaps. So if we start thinking about what car to race and what championship, I think you've got to decide who's coming with you and whether they want to commit and whether you can race without them. You've got hotel bills, you've got travel for groups of people. So if you decided to do endurance race and you were footing the bill for the whole thing, you might be buying 4 rooms at the weekend instead of one for yourself. Yeah. These are the things I think people don't always consider. So I would look at the logistics and the commitment from others and yourself, the geographical aspect of driving a vehicle, racing a vehicle at the weekend, The other thing that people often don't consider when they consider that, now if you're driving to Knock Hill for a championship round, it could be that testing's on Thursday, not Saturday before Sunday. So now you've got, and you don't always know that because you can't always tell when you sign up for a championship when the testing's going to be, obviously. But think of driving to Knock Hill for a race. If you want to test and you're racing Sunday, you're probably going to get the test day on the Friday, maybe the Thursday. And if you live in the south of England, you're not going to drive back or fly back or do whatever you're going to do to go home. So you might be just giving up time waiting around for your race on the Sunday. So I think the logistical aspects of it and the geographical aspects are quite important. And then it comes down to, I think, your knowledge of cars. If you're adept and comfortable at adjusting dampers and you've driven on semi-slicks and perhaps you've driven a Ferrari road car on a track and you're very comfortable with high performance cars and you've got the wherewithal and the budget to do it, then people polarise to those faster cars because they enjoy driving them. Yeah. But it could be that your budget doesn't allow that, and then you'll be driving perhaps potentially something a lot slower on smaller tyres because you can afford that and you can put your best into it and thoroughly enjoy it and make a real good attempt at winning something or doing as best you can because you can afford the whole budget for the season. Yeah, that's a really interesting point, and I think it's very difficult to get accurate budgets from teams or people that race because man maths, I would say, is the answer. Like, you ask anyone how much their racing costs. Like, honestly, I think if you just said, so maybe someone's really realistic and they go, okay, it might cost me $5,000 a weekend or whatever to race in a small sort of endurance series or something. I guarantee you the person that races the Ferrari Challenge or GT3 car will be like, yeah, I think it cost me $10,000. That's what I tell the family. And the reality is it might be 60. Like, no one tells you. No. And even sorry to interrupt, even people that provide the services. 100%. Because they don't want to put you off. No, they won't tell you. They won't include the extras. No. Or a crash or anything. And I definitely fell into this. And I think this is probably a common thing. I'm sure you come across this a lot. You've had nice road cars and you're like, I want to go racing. So you go, well, I want to race something that's in theory more interesting than my road cars. So that's how I ended up down the radical route. Now, I wish I could sort of talk to myself from the past and gone, right, what is your budget for the season? Like, get an actual number and go, are you comfortable spending this? Like, are you actually comfortable spending this? And like, what's the worst case scenario of the car you've picked if you crash it? Like, that's it. If you crash it, let's say you crash it once at the first event, which is your first race, which might happen. Yeah. Like, can you continue to race for the rest of the season? And I definitely was like on the edge the whole time, which I think a lot of people do because you go, I can afford the car. I know roughly what it's going to cost to do the weekend before any of these extras that no one's told me about. Or, you know, no one says, oh, by the way, you need a new set of tyres and the new set of tyres is $2,000 every weekend. And you're like, oh, okay. I wasn't aware of that. I didn't think about that. Because that immediately detracts from your experience. Even down to the truck that type of vehicle generally arrives with 2 or 3 others in an HGV, which is normally about £3 to £4 a mile. Yeah. And that isn't talked about. No. So that's what I put in the book. If you're going to rent a car, ask them what it is per pound per mile to do a test day. Yeah. What do you charge me just to take the car to track? Because in no time at all, you spent another £250, £300 that you hadn't even thought of. Yeah. Yeah. And a figure, bit of terminology that comes out that I'd not come across for a while is like cost per kilometre of driving your car. And if you talk to a very well-prepared team, and they might do it in miles, it's probably kilometres, they know that number. They know to run this car, whatever it is. Le Mans, Aston Martin GT3, I think some years ago when I spoke to a team about that, I was working with a gentleman who was off to do GT racing with the intent of racing at Le Mans, and the figure that sticks in my head, it was £700 a mile. Because they were there for whatever it is, 12, 13 days. Yeah. They've done significant testing before Le Mans. So they put that whole cost of the whole year and the prep into the weekend, and it came up at £700 a mile at Le Mans.
Yeah.
So, and that blew me away. I thought, okay,
and that's
that puts it into perspective.
It's also like a regressive curve or something, because that's assuming you do the 3,000 miles.
Yeah, exactly. And we had an interesting. I was really gutted about this. So basically, we had a customer who did a lot of charity work, and Joe and I were off on holiday to Spain with the family. And my customer just phoned me up off the cuff and said, "Look, I've just won a charity event, which is lunch with Ross Brawn at Brawn."
Oh wow, nice.
And he said, "You're gonna come with me?" And I said, "I'd love to, but I'm on holiday. I can't go." So my colleague Paul went in my place.
Yeah.
And again, one of the figures that came out of that, we're going back a while. It was obviously Brawn era, 2000 and whenever 9. And the cost for a lap in a Formula One car of that Brawn car, whatever lap it was, testing, quali, race, was £35,000 a lap.
Whoa.
And that's the figure Ross Brawn gave to Paul. And that was when he got back, he said, "You wouldn't believe what I've heard." And I was like, "Oh man, it's so good to do it that way."
Yeah.
Because it puts it into complete context, doesn't it?
It makes you really think about how expensive what it is you're racing.
Yeah, that was 2009.
That's 2009.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. £700 a lap to go to Le Mans. And then you think, really? How can it be?
Yeah.
But, just playing the diesel to transport Aston cars around the circuits and all the spares and all the testing and the build-up, you just think, oh, okay, what are we into?
Yeah.
20 grand's worth of fuel maybe for a season, or, I'm plucking numbers out of the air, but when you start to think about it, what a great way to view your own season. Yeah.
Yeah. And I wish I'd done that, approaching what do you want to get out of it and budget, because ultimately it does all come down, budget racing does really come down to budget. And therefore my question early on, and I asked this question to a few people and I never really got a satisfactory answer. And you'll be able to give me an answer is, I've got this budget. How can I best spend this to improve the most? That was basically like, I've got whatever it is, 40 grand, 50 grand a year, or whatever it is, 50 grand for the year. And my view was, I want to get faster at racing at that period of time. How can I best spend that money? You've got this amount of money. I'd possibly like to do some racing, maybe, but what should we do?
Yeah, and we can answer that quite clearly, because I that's my world.
Yeah.
That is helping people decide what to spend and how to spend it, where to spend it. Do you need to spend that amount of money that you're considering? So you need, in order to race, we've got to go back to the individual and their intent. Yeah. What are you going to race for? I'm going to enjoy myself on a race weekend. I don't want to come last, but I don't really mind where I come. I've just wanted to race. I'm 50 years old. And I've just wanted to race all my life. And then you think, okay, well, the other side of that is, right, I've now been doing the season and I've really got a bug and I really do want to win. So people evolve.
Yeah.
And you have to take people with you, or they take us with them quite often in that evolution. But I think you've got to decide what you want out of it as a starting point. So if I want to go and race something that's medium power, 200 horsepower, and enjoy a Clio race at CSCC, I think I can do that and not spend too much money on myself, and perhaps buy a car for 15k and get some local man who's a competent mechanic to look after it, and I can change the pads and do the tyre pressures. You could probably have quite a cost-effective season if you've got some basic mechanical skills and you're up for it.
Yeah.
That's one way of looking at what we're going to get into. The other way of looking at it is that somebody comes through the door and they actually want to win and they want to prepare to win. So let's take a big sort of bandwidth and discuss that. What I believe, irrespective of your starting point and where you want to get to, you need track knowledge. So what I'm often advising people to do, that they come through the door and are keen to spend money and go racing, what experience have you got? Have you been on track? I've done 1 or 2 track days, that's it. And I always suggest people should budget for a season of track days before they go racing.
Nice, yeah.
So do a season of track days. Let's go to Snetterton and let's go to Donington, where you've got some runoff. And if we're really not sure about our skill set and we're a bit uncomfortable with getting on track, let's go to Bedford, because that's a corporate facility that's got more runoff and we can toot around there quite happily, find a space in the traffic and go and enjoy a day. I was there on Monday doing exactly the same thing with a client who's about to start racing.
Nice.
Who's started to build a very, very good skill set and is quick. So get some track knowledge and understand. And if you start off from the more simplistic circuits, like we used to take customers to Bruntingthorpe, which you'd almost get for head for yourself because it was always quiet there. But sadly, about 5 years ago, that got sold off and we can't go there anymore. But that was our go-to place to get used to track speed and just implement the techniques without putting yourself or feeling you were at risk. So now we haven't got that facility. We use Bedford because being a corporate circuit, as I say, and just a nice place to be with runoff and no barriers, very few gravel traps. If you do make an error, you don't want to do that, but you might end up on the grass rather than hurting your car or yourself. So that would be a starting point in order to start building that knowledge to give you some track experience and understand how to negotiate a track at pace. Then I always say the more traditional circuits, you're starting to ramp the risk up. So they come later. Thruxton's incredibly fast. That could put someone off in a fast car. Oh, I don't think I want to go racing. I'll frighten myself on my first track day at Thruxton. So let's incrementally build your knowledge and speed and get used to it. And then I'm into Brands Hatch, Alton Park, the circuits, the traditional circuits that are very fast with limited runoff, like driving around the Nürburgring. Very similar experience, Cadwell Park.
Yeah.
So what we do is we evolve people into the more complex circuits. And I always say risk increasing factors. Start off, just get used to the car, understand yourself, whether that's with me or our team or on your own. Start building some pace, understand how to negotiate a track, understand the flags, understand a bit of track etiquette, how to let people go and when to let them go. Because it's the same in the race, because you've still got to defend and attack. Get used to having cars in your mirrors. What people often forget or perhaps just don't realise is when you race, if it's busy, I would suggest on, in a C1 race, I bet you're spending 50% of the first 3 laps on your mirrors.
Yeah.
Not looking forward, because you need to attack and defend and negotiate traffic and position yourself so that you're still moving forward, but defending from the rear. Then that takes a skill. So just being on a track day, 3 or 4 track days, what's in my mirrors? How do I negotiate those mirrors? When do I look? How do I check? That's a great entry into just understanding track etiquette and feeling comfortable with the process. Then move on to the more complex circuits so that you're starting to understand how to drive quickly within a confine, because that can be very uncomfortable to people. That can be something that gives people a feeling of discomfort just because it's very fast and you haven't got that runoff that you've had on the previous circuits. So now we've started to put a plan in place. We're starting to build track knowledge and giving people an opportunity to experience that and understand their skills. Now, the next step would be, do I need instruction? Have I got a competent skill set? I'm going to say it, aren't I? Because it's my job. It's what I do for a living and it's my business. But hand on heart, I'm not trying to sell here. You can accelerate your learning and your track knowledge so quickly. Spend 2 or 3 days with a good instructor or even a day. You're starting to, shall we say, take advantage of their skill set, their knowledge, and you can start implementing that knowledge into your skill set. And I'm also very conscious that you don't really want to start driving on track with lots of perhaps, let's not call them errors, perhaps not optimized techniques, because when you do eventually decide you need some instruction, you've got to undo all that. Yeah. And then you've got to start again from base camp 1, which is a bit more of a complex learning curve because you've got to overwrite your neurological pathways again. So just getting into the right groove in your early days, I think that a day with an instructor, just so that you're understanding where to brake, where to look, trail braking, acceleration points, braking techniques, that can really help you. So we're starting to build knowledge without having spent any real money yet. So your first season of racing, if you've not done all this, I always say it's quite often just a mental overload. Yeah. It's an emotional overload because you're trying to do everything on the move at speed, and sometimes it's just not a good experience from what people tell me. So I think building in a season of track day driving and then deciding to go racing is a very sensible route in. What I would then think of in terms of what championship I'm going to race in, I'm starting to link all this together now, aren't I? I've got my team around me. I know they can support me. I've got the sign off from my family, be that your partner, your children. Yeah, Dad's going racing at the weekend. We're not coming this weekend. That's fine. because Dad's going to Knock Hill
Yeah.
and we can't all be there. These are the things that cause complications, don't they, when you race?
Yeah.
Because you want your family involved. Then you've got the geographical areas that we've spoken about. Then you've got your own personal development, that skill set that you need. I think, as I say, it varies, but there is a path in, and I'm starting to obviously lay that out for you. Is that ticking boxing on that question?
Totally. The one of the things you brought up about is how like overloading it is, and that is something that I think about from my first race, or even now, after, I don't know, 20 something races or whatever, 30 or something, that sort of amount. There's still stuff that like stresses me out. Like I'm a very quite stressed person on a race day, and anything I can do to help reduce that. Like it's the small stuff that like can become stressful that you don't necessarily think about. You wouldn't think about, like, when do you have to go to where? When do you have to collect X, Y, Z? When do you have to go to a briefing? Like, when do you have to be in the car to go to the...
Got it in one.
That sort of stuff. Like, if you can have someone else helping or pointing, like I always had it when someone was looking after the car, they'd be like, Sam, you need to be in the car now. And you're like, okay. Like, because you can do as much planning as you want, and you should do as much as possible. But like, ultimately, you're in your head, definitely in the early days, you're going, I'm about to go racing. I'm going to have to drive really fast on a track with a lot of people, with others in a car that I may not have driven loads, that I'm like, I think I got this, but I don't know. Like, I'm going to probably drive faster than I'm, all these stuff. And you're not like, oh, you haven't done your helmet up.
Yeah, and for example, which is what I've put in the book, often you need to be at the collection area 40 minutes before your allotted race start.
Yeah.
30 minutes, 20 minutes. So you don't appreciate that. So having somebody around and then I always say, if you're in garages and it's a championship that commands perhaps the bigger chunk of time on the weekend, you end up in a garage. And then the shorter races end up somewhere in the pits.
Yeah.
Now at Snetterton, that can be on the grass on the way in near the car park, can't it? And I always think it's okay if you're with a group of people that are all in the same race in the garages, you all leave at the same time. Yeah. Or somebody says, driver's briefing in 20 minutes from the series, walks down the garages and just says, driver's briefing 20 minutes. But then if you've got there late or you haven't got that allocated space, you could be literally a 5-minute walk from everybody else in your championship. If you got there late, you could be on the grass on the way into Snetterton. And you think, I'm lost. What time's the briefing? Yeah. Where do I go? How do I get to the collection area from here? So all those little detail points, they're the stressors. You're absolutely right. That's why it's in the book. Plan it. Even if, for example, if you're out of the way of the main group, go and walk the route you're going to drive to the collection area. Yeah. Get there early and go and walk it. And I also think you do track days and you get to a track day and people are used, if they've not raced but done track days, you're almost used to parking where you want. Yeah. And then often if you haven't got a garage, you take the stuff out of your car, you put maybe a tarpaulin over it. That's your spot for the day. And then you go to a race weekend, race transporters, trailers, a myriad of different vehicles. They could be 10, 12 races, couldn't they? Yeah. You've got all that machinery and hardware. And then you think, hang on, this looks different. Yeah, it's so different. I'm not allowed there. I've got to go here. They're telling me I can only go here. But I've only been over there. Yeah. How do you get to collection area? Yeah. Yeah, it's all simple stuff, but on race day, you just do not want that added emotional stress riser. Yeah. Yeah, and you're in such a heightened state. Like, yes. You're going to go racing. Like, yeah. Like, I always I've got some great stories. Feel sick. I've got some great things that have, sorry, talking over you there. No, carry on. Just some great things. I've helped a lot of people, and a lot of people just, come for the training and then go off and do their race. I get an email, how it's gone, that type of thing. Some people don't make contact, I'll see them and I know that they've raced. Somebody says, oh, so-and-so race, oh, well done. But some people, I'm with, and I've accompanied them over the years. And then what always makes me smile, not in a condescending way, it's just, I know exactly what you mean. Because I helped this guy start racing historics, and I went with him to Castle Clune, and he got out of the car after his first race, and I said, "How was that?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "I can't remember any of it." Yeah, and he had race 2, so it was 2 races on a Sunday, and then he did race 2, and he got out of the car, and how was that? He said, "I think I started actually realising I was in a race about 3 laps before the checkered flag came out, because he's just completely overloaded."
Yeah.
And then another guy, again, all nice things. It's not me sitting here laughing at them. It's just discussing the point. So I got the V-Box to somebody who started their first race, and they did 5 laps, palming the steering wheel with their hand on the gear lever. So the race starts, and then that's their steering. Now, we know why that is, because probably in the car normally, that is probably what they do. So their brain just says, I'm overloaded. Yeah. I'm going to go back to what I naturally do. My pathways are open for that. I don't need to think about it. Hence the need, when you coach people, let's get this muscle memory for having your hands in the right place. And he gave me the card. He said, review that and then send it to me. He said, I'd love your feedback. And then I phoned him up and I said, you look like you're really enjoying yourself. He said, yeah, it's fantastic. I really enjoyed it. He did very well on his first race. He had a great race. And I said, interesting hand position for the first 5 laps. And he said, what do you mean? I said, I'll send you the card. And then he phoned me back, and having watched it, and said, I don't recall that at all. If you'd have said to me, without the V-Box, my hands were there, he said, I probably would have categorically denied.
Yeah.
So they're nice examples. They're not me taking the mickey out of people. It's just, once you get into that situation where we don't make good decisions when we're nervous. So if you look at the psychology of it, you've got the side of your brain that deals with emotion in its simplest form, the side of your brain that is more thinking and process. That's why mindfulness exercises are so good, because they can draw you out of that emotional content into the parts of your brain that are now thinking and calculating. So I think, there's some very simple mindfulness exercises. I do them myself. So if you count backwards from 20 down to 0, that starts pulling you out of that emotional state into the thinking state. So what I would do on a start line, I'm still racing, as you know, in C1, as I would, before I get in the car, I just sit there in the pits with my helmet on. I know Mark's coming in, he's been boarded to come in. I just sit there counting backwards quietly with my eyes shut, 20 to 0. That prepares me.
Nice.
Then you can breathing exercises. So increase the tidal volume as you start breathing. If we breathe normally, some of the air that you breathe out goes back in. But if I now breathe a little deeper using my diaphragm and breathe out more assertively, shall we say, using my diaphragm, then you get more clean air into your lungs. It calms you for various chemical reasons in your blood. So if you breathe in slowly for 3 and out slowly for 6, that has a calming effect on a lot of people. Another mindfulness / relaxation exercise. So what you can do, because we always come back to preparation, what you can do is find these exercises that actually help you calm. So maybe those first few laps when you're racing aren't quite as stressful.
Yeah,
you're going to be stressed, aren't you? Any breathing exercise or mental fitness exercise is probably not going to cut it for your first race. But percentages, it might be a 1 or 2, 3% that gives you some assistance
and enables you to be thinking about racing. That point about the guy driving, it's so like sticks for me, because I'm such a stickler of like, I want to have the footage, and I want to have the footage for all sorts of reasons, but like specifically, like this expression I have from when I was little was like, pics or it didn't happen. Like if something happened, and so your mates would be like, yeah, but like, if you got a photo of it, because otherwise it didn't happen. And specifically with crashes, I've found I have a perception in my head of what happened, but that is not necessarily aligned. For many reasons, you could be tired. You could be in this headspace where you're just overhyped and like you think your hands are at 9 and 3 or whatever, and actually you've got a palm on the wheel and you're doing that.
Yeah.
So then when you crash, or if you crash and you look at the footage, you can start to reprogram that in of go like, this is why.
That's what I did.
That's what I did. This is what actually happened. Because I've had a lot of, I don't know, I'm not sure what the right word is. It's not like psychological trauma. I think that sounds like a really intense thing. But from accidents when I didn't know why they happened. And
I think
whether it's like, for whatever reason, a camera got unplugged and smashed against the windscreen and I didn't get it. And I was like, oh, come on. That was like the biggest crash I've ever had. Why do I not have it on footage? Like, I want to know what happened. Because if you don't know what happened, and I think probably a lot of people feel this in driving, if you don't know how it happened, that's really scary.
Yes, because emotionally, your brain needs a story to help you develop into a state of calm where you're emotionally comfortable because you've worked out what happened. Yeah, somebody just saying, "Don't worry about it; it'll be fine," doesn't cut it, does it? No, you've got to actually start dissecting it, reflecting on it, and then understanding where perhaps the issues were that caused the problem. Yeah, totally agree with that. Yeah. And quite often that's engineering knowledge. That's what I find is it's helping people understand car dynamics and what a car is capable of. You touched on it earlier about, how fast somebody is when we started the conversation, or what do they need to understand how to race or go fast. What I've learned over the years is, if depending on the books you read and the psychologists and the neuroscientists, I'm a geek. I read a lot of this for my job, and I find it fascinating, and sports psychology, so I'm into it, and I read a lot about it. But there's a very strong suggestion that your brain has a G meter in it that triggers at about 0.5 G. You can find this on the internet. You'll find it in various books. So what you realise is when you're working with somebody that's never been on track before, a modern tyre on a saloon car will generate about 0.9 G. If you've got a slightly better tyre than perhaps, just a normal Hankook or a current good quality tyre, and it's a bit more sporty, you'll be about 1 G to 1.1 G.
Yeah.
And if you think of a GT3 RS on Cup 2s, you're around 1.5 G these days. So if you've never been to track before, I like to put logic to it, because people start to feel sometimes a bit uncomfortable because I say, well, I just don't feel comfortable driving at this speed around the corner. And then my question is always, coaching, do you know why? And sometimes people just can't answer, no, I'm not sure. I just don't feel comfortable. Well, if you've never been on track before and you drive on the road, in reality, I doubt most road drivers achieve more than 0.5 to 0.6 G.
Yeah.
So I always tag it. If I go around a roundabout that I've misjudged, you go, whoa, that's a bit fast. In my head, that's about 0.6 G for most people.
Yeah.
So you've got that feeling that we're all driving at about 0.2 to 0.5 G. I'm going to sidetrack completely here. I won't take us down a rabbit hole. But now they're looking, because we deal with engineers regularly, we're working with clients, engineering clients, they're heavily into looking for autonomous cars about the G loadings that our bodies can achieve without feeling uncomfortable, because that 0.5 G is a threshold.
Interesting.
If you've got an autonomous car that's whizzing your clients through the town at 0.5 G, you'll have them all wanting to get out, feeling sick and nervous.
Yeah.
So there are, I won't mention the name, and again, I think this is out on the internet, there are manufacturers now of autonomous cars and systems that are potentially, they've been researching having lights in the car. And I know this is on the internet, I'm not saying something I shouldn't, you can find it on the internet. So a blue light flashing when the car's going to turn left, and a dull red light flashing when you're going to turn right.
Yeah, I like
to prepare your brain for what is coming. Yeah. Because you're not in control. So if you take a step back to where I started the conversation about 0.5 G, and I think that's a good number, 0.5, 0.6 G, you often feel people coming out the brake pedal and braking, or coming out the gas pedal in the corner because they're new to it. So what I've worked out, going back to the experience you need to hence do track days rather than just jump in a race car, I believe your brain needs some kind of established recognition of the G load that you're going to put on track in order for you to stay calm.
Yeah. So
let's say you've never done track days, you're not an adrenaline junkie, you don't ski down mountains at speed, or you don't spend your life at Alton Towers on roller coasters. Your brain doesn't know let's say you've got 1 G to race on, it doesn't know what 1 G feels like.
Yeah.
So take away all the content, all the racing, all the skills, all the driver training, or all the speed that you're looking for around a lap. Our starting point, it becomes very obvious. Your brain just doesn't understand what 1 G is. Right, let's spend this day understanding 1 G. Let's get on the pad, as we do with most people. Let's drive at 1 G. So in most cars, if you brake, what you can generate longitudinally and laterally, unless you're in a heavy aero car, it'll be the same. So if you can pull 1 G under braking, you'll pull 1G in a corner. And that averages out in most cars.
Yeah.
So if you now get onto the mile straight at the start of the day and start braking, what you're actually doing, by the time you've ABS stopped and then got onto threshold braking, you're tuning your brain to what 1G feels like.
Yeah.
Right, we got that. Now we'll get onto the cornering and we'll talk about it. So you're probably nervous or feeling a little uncomfortable. If you're not sure why, it might just be the G load and your brain isn't used to.
Yeah.
So then we get onto the corners. Okay, let's start at this speed around the corners. I've got a G meter in my head because I train engineers. I know what 0.5 is, 0.7, 0.8.
Yeah.
I don't need a meter to tell me. So I've been doing it for over 20 years. So let's start at 0.5 G. Tell me what this feels like. Oh, yeah, I'm comfortable here. Okay, give me another 15, 20% of speed. And then I'm thinking we're at 0.75 G now. And then, well, it doesn't feel quite so comfortable now. No, I'm feeling a bit uncomfortable. So what I've worked out, we our instructors and I, it's all right me saying to you, right, this is what we're going to do today, Sam. These are the techniques we're going to work on. And you start to establish that technique in your pathways and you're repeating it. But then your brain says, now, hold on a minute. I've got it. I understand the skills. I'm practicing them, but I haven't done this enough times to know that it's safe.
Yeah.
So then by the end of the day, they're all whizzing around the handling circuit very quickly. You pull up in the car park. How was that? How'd you feel emotionally? I feel very comfortable. If you're happy, I'll keep going.
Yeah.
So the next loop is what we ask for is for people. We put a lot into this when we train almost everybody. We want you to understand your emotional state. There's two things that are going to happen when you've got a change in emotional state. So if I'm in the briefing room with a client and they're relaxed, once you get in the car, if there's an emotional state change, so you start feeling excited, frightened, nervous, ecstatically happy, really enjoying yourself, any kind of emotional state change, which includes some kind of heart rate change, then what you then see is if people are inexperienced or on early in that journey of learning, two things happen. Your hands grip up, and your eyes go down. And I've trained so many people, you just see that as a common thread in human beings. That's not individuals, that's human beings. So what we then teach you and start discussing, or at least question, is how do you feel? Because if you get onto the handling circuit and you're new to track days, you've not been on a track and you're in a 911 that came in GT4 on Cup 2s that's going to pull 1.4 G, I can almost guarantee once that person starts hitting 1.1 G, they are going to feel emotionally challenged.
Yeah.
Now we can deal with that because what we can say is, let's get a positive loop working. How do you feel? Well, I'm feeling a bit uncomfortable with this. Okay, where are your eyes? I'm starting to look down in the corners. So now there's another loop within that big loop. That small loop is observation. Because when you look down at speed, your eyes can't focus. So then your brain says, hang on, this is now getting dangerous because I can't focus. So then your emotional changes again. You get another change because your brain can't cope with the fact that you're traveling quickly, but you can't focus. So then you ask them to look up and everybody starts to calm down again. Mm. So it's starting to recognize that loop. Now, if you go racing and you've had no tuition, I would guess if you're going to do 20-minute races, my gut feel is, because I get people that say, I've been racing 3 or 4 years and I've done lots of 20-minute races. So you might have done 30, 20-minute races, but you've not had any tuition. And then what you probably don't get time to work out, a lot of people do, so it's a general conversation, but you might not start to pick up on all these emotional triggers that then make your performance more difficult or more challenging or inhibit your speed. The other one, I don't ask the question anymore, but if I'm sitting in the passenger seat on a track day, I know when my client's becoming uncomfortable with the speed if they're new to it. So if they've got a peaked helmet on, I'm sitting looking forward and then I see the peak dip.
Yeah.
And I think, you're at that point where your brain is saying, hang on, this is too fast. I'm not comfortable with this G. And what then happens, I'll say, head up, where are you looking? And then I don't ask the question anymore. I used to say, did you mean to put your foot down when your head went up? And they say, I didn't know I did. So what you now see regularly, as the peak of the helmet goes up in unison, the foot goes down.
Yeah.
So what I've worked out is, very simply, if your head's down and the world is rushing past you and you can't focus, your brain says, well, hold on, that's too fast. You look up and then observe correctly to the furthest point and scan back. Your brain says, I can focus now and I know where you want to go. I'll let you put your foot down.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I've gone down a bit of a rabbit hole with that, but what there is in all those little small detailed emotional points, coming back to the mindfulness and starting the race and not remembering what happened for the first 20 laps or the whole race is, I believe that's more of an emotional challenge if people aren't prepared.
Yeah.
So if somebody comes to you and said, I bought a car, I've got the winter to prepare, and then I'm starting my race, then you can help them and prepare for all this. If somebody arrives and says, I've done 10 races, we're using my road car today, and then we start working, what I've just talked about for the last 5, 7, 8 minutes is what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Because they've raced and they've got to a point where they can go quickly, but they might not have got to a point where they can control or understand their emotional state. They might not even recognise it.
Yeah.
Because they're just themselves in the car, and they don't, how could you? I couldn't, unless I'd obviously, before I did this job, you just feel how you feel.
Yeah.
So there's lots of, I would just call them positive circles, because you can just have a little chink in that circle and a gap, and then that stops you completing the circle and going quicker.
Yeah.
So you've got to find those gaps in the positive learning circle, the learning outcomes.
Yeah,
and what we're saying here, it's very relevant.
It is a really interesting topic, and like at the moment, I don't drive on track very much. Like, I spend a lot of time looking after a little person, and I just don't get that much track time. So what happens is every time I get on track, and I had a session on a track like a week ago or 2 weeks ago, is all of that memory of like what it feels like to go fast. It's kind of like fading into the distance. Like
100%.
I remember, like if you said, put me in my radical, I would know this corner is flat. This corner is slightly, give or take, we roughly should be at this pace. But it was there in my GTS, and I'm driving around and I'm like, I know I'm driving at like 80%, maybe 90, but I'm nowhere near that last. Nowhere near. But at the same time, I'm not comfortable. I'm not comfortable doing the next step. And I guess this is an issue if you don't consistently have track time of any sort.
Agreed.
And you're trying to go racing. So if you're only going to go racing and you're going to go, I'm going to do 3 weekends a year, every time you get in the car, if they're really spaced out, it takes me 10 laps
of course,
to warm up, to start to get into the space. Whereas in a race, the best people, and if you've done lots of preparation, lap 1 is like bang.
That's it.
And you're gone.
Yeah. Now to dig deeper into that discussion point, and then we're racing I'm racing the C1, you might remember, with my son, and that's really coming together now, and we're doing well. And he's doing fantastically well. So that's all really come together, and we're a competitive team. We've got track toys running us, and they're competitive and know how to set the car up, and it's all working. But we're doing 3 races a year. Yeah. Probably 4 next year, we've decided, just budget and time. And what we always do is a test day, possibly a track day, definitely a test day, and then we race, just so we're tuned in. Yeah. We've got enough experience to be able to dial in fairly quickly. But they relayed many corners last year. I think it was October last year at Snetterton. They relayed around 5 corners.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and then we went back to Snetterton, and we were in testing. We were 3 to 4 seconds slower than we were the previous year.
Interesting.
And then it was all in the corners, and everybody was slower.
Yeah.
But you then have to relearn Snetterton, because 5 of the corners, and then you realise that because we're generating more grip, that the pyro and the tyres are now wrong, because the tyres. Can you explain
what that means?
Sorry, so the tyres, because the 5 corners have got higher mu, higher coefficient of friction. We're now putting more heat into the tyres than we did on the previous race at the end of the year.
Okay.
So then our tyres are getting too hot, which now the pressures are going too high,
and then the contact shape is changing.
Yeah. So now we're getting less grip.
Right.
So there we go. So now we arrive at Snetterton knowing the circuit's been relayed. We know what our target lap time is, and then you blow all that out of the water, because you've now got a different surface you're driving on, and the car behaves. So what was going to be a nice casual 4 sessions on test day became a head scratching, we've got a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
And then when we went to the hotel on the Friday night, ready for the race on the Saturday, it was, even though I do this for a living, I hope that's not us. I hope that really is the surfaces. Yeah. And we haven't got a dyno, so we're not 5 horsepower down on the engine and what have you. And then, qualifying. We're all in the same boat. So, but there's another example, because you've got all these curveballs getting thrown at you racing, haven't you? It's not just you in the car doing 3 races and your skill. It's that tracks evolve, don't they? They're like living beings. So you've got yourself, and then you've got all the other variables to deal with that might affect exactly what you've said. Well, last time I came here, I was driving at 97%. Now I'm here and the track's completely changed. Now the car's different. Where am I driving at now? I need those skills and that curiosity to be able to develop pace. So I totally agree with what you're saying. If you don't race very often, you start to lose that perception of what the optimum is. Yeah, agreed.
Yeah,
we always speak of perception and reality. What is your perception and what is the reality? And you're often putting the two together. But in terms of,
I was going to say things like having cameras in cars, or if you've got a coach, obviously they can look at you and say what you're doing. That can really help with that mismatch.
Agreed. Yeah. So does repetition, and so does perfect repetition, because you could repeat something and perhaps not do it perfectly. So I always say, as the good coaching books will tell us, perfect practice makes permanent. Yeah. Rather than just practice makes permanent. Not necessarily. You might be learning things and making permanent what you don't want. Perfect practice makes permanent. And then that develops muscle memory, which allows you to perhaps just jump on that lap time a bit quicker. But I agree. I think we can underestimate that. And going back to the book, we veered off. I'm not intentionally pulling us back to the book, but that's what the book is about. It's saying, look, you're entering into a sport where there are so many variables, it's easy to get lost. And that loss of focus or direction normally leads to something going wrong. Yeah. So let's get started on the right foot. We spoke of budget. I'm pretty OCD. I'm one for doing things correctly. So I'd rather race, let's call it a slower, less gripped car. Yeah. Perfectly, because I can afford the new tyres when I need them. I can afford to get the engine refreshed when I need it, rather than something highly complex that I know I'd be perhaps compromising on a tyre for a race, or the extra geo check, or the extra dyno check to make sure it's up to power. So, and psychologically, that is a huge difference. Like I've raced cars where I've gone, honestly, it just doesn't even, like, it doesn't matter if I stuff it. If we write off the whole car, like, it's kind of okay. Like it's okay. Like, it's not great, but it's okay. Whereas I've raced cars where you go, if I smash the wing off, that's a bad day. Yeah. Let alone write off the whole car. Like, write off the whole car is just like a no. That's not possible. And being in that headspace allows for all of these things that we've been talking about. Yeah, agreed. And I do, as I say, I do this daily, but I still have that same feeling. So if we're using a car on track, say Mark and I, I'm doing a track day for myself, I think, well, I might be needing this for, work on Tuesday. Whereas if I jump into RC1, it's head down and let's get on with it. But in a works car where I'm on track, it's always, I'll just leave 5% on the, not used, because I don't want to destroy the brakes. I don't want to destroy the tyres. I don't want to be servicing it before it needs to work at Millbrook on Wednesday. So, and it's a work car. It would just cause me aggravation if something went awry. So I totally agree. To be able to, somebody said that to me years ago. You should be racing something that you could afford to write off and carry on with your life. Yes. Now, when people are obviously on the road to professional motorsport, that might not be the case. Nicky Lauda, didn't he? Yeah. Took a bank loan to buy a seat with Brabham. So I know people do it for professional development, but for us, with families and children and commitments other than racing, I think you should be able to do that. If it all goes wrong, okay, it sits in the garage or it sits at the workshop, and I'll just get on with my life and I'll scratch my head on how I'm going to get it right, repair it. Yeah, and it loops back to that, I guess. Why are you here? Yeah. And for me, it is kind of like, there's a part of me that's like, I want to get better at driving. Yeah.
If that leads to quicker lap times, driving on track should get there. I want more skills and whatever, but ultimately I want to have fun. And that's something
Yes.
I've realized. The more stress and the stuff, that's the anxiety around everything, you come away from the weekend and especially if something's like not gone that well, you're like, I'm not sure I had fun.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Yeah, you've got to enjoy it. Yeah, and that I think is, for those that haven't raced and they're thinking about it, that might, in my mind, that might take a season or two before you really decide whether you are enjoying in this.
Yeah.
Because we know it comes with so many potential pitfalls. It really is highs and lows, isn't it? It could be, a tangle on the first lap that finishes your race because you got a puncture. It could be the ecstasy of standing on the podium all in your first season. But I think there's such an emotional roller coaster to experience before you actually think, oh, no, I'm really enjoying this.
Yeah.
And I'm getting value for money and it's good fun. Yeah, I think many sports are a lot simpler. And I believe there's so many there's so many different facets that make up a successful race weekend. It takes experience to put them all together and not find yourself, exposed to something that you just didn't know was coming, like a broken throttle cable as you go to the collection area and you haven't got a spare one, and it's all happened, isn't it? And
someone's put your diff back together wrong and it fries itself. That's happened to me.
Yeah. Yes, there you go. Yes, exactly that. Yeah, I've got some funny stories, actually. There was years ago, I knew somebody that was rebuilding the gearbox on a 911 and you could put the diff in either way round.
Right.
In the left side or the right side. They got to the racetrack and I think they had 5 reverse gears and 1 forward. So, there's some things that sat with me. Yeah, there's some things that sat with you. Oh, no, get it right before you go. Make sure it works. Yeah,
run it through the gears.
Yeah, that's it. Roll it on your drive if you can't drive it on the road, just to make sure it's doing what it should. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, there's a potential, big potential for things to go wrong. So the book is, back to that book. That's about all the things I've learned over the years and listened to clients talking about and the errors that perhaps, all the misjudgments they've made. I've put it all in there to the best of my ability, even just down to, seating position and keeping yourself safe. Once your belts are on, can you reach the fire extinguisher buttons? Can you turn the car off? These are all really simple things that sometimes we just don't think about. So there's a whole host of just what sounds very logical is logical if you've done it before.
Yeah.
Sometimes people often say to me, oh, I think I knew that, but I hadn't really thought about it. And I say, yeah, I agree. You haven't thought about it. It's not logical until someone points it out and you think, oh, yeah, I kind of knew that, but I just needed somebody to point me in the right direction.
And there's got to be so many things of that in that brain capacity scenario of something's going wrong. You've spun or whatever. I know for me, I think it's an automatic-ish reaction now. Like, press the clutch down.
Yeah.
Get that clutch down before you fry something. But if you've not thought about that and you've not even run it just static, okay.
Yes.
I know in historics, it's often you get throttle sticking type scenarios. Not necessarily that often, but you see it happen.
Yeah.
And running through, I've not really driven a car where that's necessarily been an issue, so I've not practiced that. But what do you do in that scenario? Because you are going to be shitting yourself if you've not practiced and you've not had it before.
No, exactly. Yeah. Depends where it goes wrong, doesn't it? If the throttle stick's open and you're on a straight, you can pop a clutch. Or again, it depends if you've got a rev limiter. Most cars have. If they haven't got a rev limiter, you're going to blow your engine. So most people run in the older historics with a rev limiter. That's a sensible thing to do. If it's on a straight, it's clutch down and turn the engine off. Yeah. Because you've got no choice. If it's in a corner, now you might just be going off before you can react. Yeah. But clutch down takes the drive away, so you're gonna probably get some lift off or roll oversteer. So you're in survival mode then, aren't you? If something like that, I just call them light bulb moments, things that you can't really plan for.
But you could sit there, I guess, in your seat and spend 5 minutes just going clutch down, engine switch.
Exactly.
Which hand do I do this with? Like that sort of stuff.
Yeah. We've got to a point in the C1 where, so the last 3 races, we finished second, fourth and second.
Nice.
And the fourth, I'm not making racing driver excuses here, but we pitted late and the safety car came out.
Yeah.
I think Mark was about 40 seconds ahead. So we're there or thereabouts.
Yeah.
So Mark came to Millbrook at the end of last year. We went through what we do in the pit lane. So my procedure is, as I enter the pit lane, first gear, down to 40 Ks, window down, because you've got a hue tag as you go out. So that's preparing for either. We both window down, ready to hue tag when you leave. Then I'm left hand on the steering wheel as I come into the pits. Belts, key, door, out. That's my routine. Belts, key, door, out. Belts, key, door, out. Belts, key, door, out. So what I've been doing when I get out of my car in the evenings prior to the race weekend, I pull up on my drive and I go belts, key, door, out. Belts, key, door, out. So I can say it now because it's in my head. Yeah. Exactly that. So you're now preparing, you're curious and you're preparing not to make errors because your brain is muscle memory. I've got pathways now in my brain for that simple cognitive task, how to get out of the car quickly.
Yeah. And that's a good point. You can practice that stuff in your road car.
Yes.
Like if you want to, you can start drilling that muscle memory. Yeah. I'm reading the where is it? Mark Donoghue book.
Yeah.
The Unfair Advantage, and I think at one point,
that's a classic. That one.
Yeah, it's good so far. I'm about halfway through. I think he was racing something like a bunch of older stuff, maybe some Cobras and Ford GT or something, and got into a situation where needed to get out of the car's on fire, and he was used to driving with cars that didn't have seatbelts, and his car had a seatbelt.
Oh, yeah.
And he just started trying to get out of the car, and then eventually clocked like, shit, I've got a seatbelt on. And then I think from that moment on, he was like, I made sure that like literally any car had a seatbelt so that I always have to take a seatbelt off. I'm never in this one where sometimes I don't, sometimes I do. And then like drilling that. Yeah. But like I could see, these things happen when you're in different cars, different situations. Someone's done something funny.
Yeah, engine fires. So if you've got an engine fire, that can bore brake fluid. So you have no brakes. You can't stop the car that's on fire. So, if you start looking at safety in racing, go back to base camp 1. Have you taken the fire extinguisher pin out?
Yeah.
The transit pin. I've done it. Everybody does it. When they start racing, you should have a methodical, that's what's in the book for safety. Have a checklist. I always say if we all drove our cars like pilots through planes, you got your pre-flight checks. Almost nobody gets in the car and does a pre-drive check.
No.
But if you get in your race car and do, let's call it a pre-flight check, how am I going to get out? What would happen if the car was inverted? It's all in the book. Can you reach everything if you're upside down?
Yeah.
Nobody wants to think about that. But, you see cars upside down on racetracks, on track days and racing, it happens. So how are you going to get out? I'm not suggesting you turn your car on its roof to find that out, but is everything in the car secured that if it was inverted or to hit something hard, that it's going to remain safe? Yeah. So I know somebody who, I tell this to all my customers, all my clients when we do trades. So if they've got full harness belts, when I get out the car, I always say, are you going to do those up? Because quite often people are carefully strapping them around the back of the seat for the road.
Oh, yeah.
And sometimes people leave them just hanging.
Yeah, I definitely do that.
This gentleman is an acquaintance. I haven't seen him for many years, but there's somebody I knew who was a test driver that lost his left eye.
Oh, yeah.
Because he had an accident in a test car and the passenger belts, full harnesses were loose, and he had an accident into a barrier and the belt took his left eye. So
that's a really interesting point.
So when I get into a car with a client who's got full belts and they're just loose in the seat, I always tell them that story. I've told now your listeners will know. Just it's no good me knowing it without handing it on, is it? I can help someone if I hand it on. That's what's in the book.
What? Okay. That is interesting. I think, because, let's say I've got a 997 RS that's got belts, but most of the time, the lap one is like, it's kind of under the seat. And so it sort of sticks out the front. But the other ones are just behind the seat down the back. Now, there's actually no way of, what on earth do you do with them? Because, in theory...
Tie wrap them. Roll them up and put a tie wrap around them.
That's the move.
Then when you go to track days, just take a pair of snippers and start using them. Take a few spare tie wraps.
I will do this. That is a very good idea, because I've not thought about that. But the metal clips at the end of a belt, they're definitely long enough to hit you in the face.
Yeah. Now imagine if you hit something at 60 miles an hour, just imagine the de-acceleration rates. Just go onto YouTube and look at the cars fired down the crash tubes and see what happens inside. Yeah.
I had a funny C1 one in the crash where the camera came off and the card came out. The radio came out. Smacked me in the face.
Here we go.
And luckily, I was wearing a full face helmet.
Yeah.
Whereas I don't think you have. Do you have to in that series?
No, I wear open face because I want the air around my face when we race the C1.
Yeah, because it gets hot. Do they still? Because do you have to still have the radio in the car?
You do. We started with earpieces, but we realised if we put the radio up, very obviously secured, professionally done by the guys at Track Tours, that's now sitting by our right ear.
Oh, so, I'm talking about a different type of radio. Are you allowed to have communication in the cars now?
No, sorry. No, we're not. All we've got is one way. We can hear the clerk of the course. We've got a speaker in our right.
Oh, that's quite good. Okay.
On the B pillar.
But no, so I'm talking about the actual car radio that plays FM.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
The unit came out.
Yeah. Oh, crikey. Wow. Yeah. Okay.
I think you can. I don't know what they do now, but I'm sure some people have, like, whatever it was in our car, it wasn't secure enough to take a 60 mile an hour hit into a solid object or whatever it was. And it hit my helmet. I was like, what the bloody hell was that?
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Well, there we go. Look what we're talking about. Real simple guidance just to put some logic to go in racing. Sit in the seat. If you think of, again, I won't keep saying it, but it is in the book, just sitting in your seat, what you want is the maximum contact patch between your seat and your spine.
Right, yeah.
Because if you're incorrectly seated and you have an accident, you're more likely to twist your spine in the seat. That's what we run a tilt seat, because I'm happy to spend money on an ergonomically designed seat that's going to help keep me safe. So your seating position, your hands device, all these just small detail points. Are there any cables in the footwell hanging down that you're going to get caught when you perhaps decide to jump on the brake in a hurry because things are going wrong? Or there's lots in there. And I think, I've done it. You change your tyres and you pop your torque wrench in the boot and you forget it on track day, and then you drive around the track and then there's a clunk, clunk, clunk. Oh, crikey, I've left my torque wrench in the boot. In you go, jump out, put it back in the pits. Yeah. You know, if people are working on your car, if they left any tools in the car, they're going to fly around. Yeah. So then that puts back, if you're working with engineers, you always have to ask them, am I good to go? That's my phrase. People have others. But you need to ask permission to leave the pits from the person who's worked on your car. Am I good to go? Yeah, and that's interesting. Get a thumbs up. Because, no, don't go yet, because I've left that in the boot and I've got to talk that wheel.
You're off the floor.
Yeah, exactly. And then, how many times do we change brake pads, forget to pump up the brake pedal so that the pads are pushed back onto the disc? So you change your pads. I don't think I do it now because I think I'm a bit wise in the tooth for this now, but I can remember as a young man changing brake pads because I used to service cars for your neighbours and things. Back it out the garage and then be pumping the pedal like crazy because I'm about to hit the fence behind because I haven't pumped the pedal back up to push the pads onto the disc. Yeah. So then what should we do when we get in the car? Engineers just change the pads or works on the car. Static brake check. Make sure you got pedal effort, pressure. Then as you go down the pits, press the brake pedal. Rolling brake check. So, and turn the steering wheel in the pit lane, just a few degrees. Right, steering, I've got static brake, pressure. Now I've turned the engine on and there's a servo starting to help me. I've got rolling brake pressure. The car's doing its job. Oh, yeah, and it's stopping straight. I haven't even got on the track yet, and I've done 3 procedures there to make sure I'm safe. Yeah. So there's a, you could, in theory, on the test day, you could put new pads in. You could drive out onto the track, in theory, you could meet the first corner at pace and not have a brake pedal because you haven't pushed the pads back onto the disc.
Yeah.
And the pistons are all back in the calipers.
I think there's quite a few tracks where you could get up quite a lot of, if you don't take necessarily the first corner, like Silverstone, you could roll out.
Yep.
And you'd be going quite fast, depending on which pitch you came out of. By the time you get to the end of like Hanger Straight or something, if you've gone that way, and you've not checked a brake, and then you need it. Yeah.
So actually, some kind of formal pre-flight check in the car before you drive it. The steering's working, the brakes are working. I'm strapped in, I'm secure, I'm correctly seated. The passenger door's shut, my driver's door's shut. The car's got fuel. The fuel cap's back on. Okay, so that was recently. I was on a track day. Wow. Someone had left their cap. They refueled their caterer in the pits. They pulled out the pits. I can't think where I was now. I do a lot of track days. Anyway, I pulled out the pits from a client. We're off on the track. There's a fuel cap on the caterer back, and now he's sloshing fuel. And he did get flagged. So the big to the marshals, they saw it straight away. I'll keep going here because I'm going to embarrass myself now, and I don't mind making a bit of a chump of myself in public. I went to Spa I took our Caterham, and my friend David and I did a double track day at Spa in our Caterham, and he's really into data. So I'm working with David and his wife, and he won't mind me mentioning his name. So David's done the data and looked at his lap, and now it's his partner's turn. She's strapped in, I'm in the passenger seat. He puts his laptop on the back of the car. We drive out the pits, and we've got a laptop on the back of the car. I'm embarrassed to say that, okay? I'm embarrassed to say it. And we were just doing a sighting lap to come back in because David's wife hadn't driven on that track. So I said, let's just do a slow lap, get the tyres up to temp. We'll come back in the pits, we'll check the pressures, retorque the wheels, and we'll go. And as we drove back into the pits, there's David literally and Joe running at the car, laptop still on the back.
Amazing.
Yeah. Hey, there you go. I've embarrassed myself now.
That's funny.
But, it's, you can do it, can't you?
These things happen. I definitely, I think I need to make up some checklists. That's it. It's like, make some checklists that you do, and you could even have them like taped somewhere visible.
Yeah.
If it's in a car.
I'll give you another one. Here goes. I'll make myself look an idiot again. I'm now racing at Snetterton last year on the Saturday and the Sunday. I bought a brand new crash helmet, a Bell carbon open face, and it's got the visor that pulls down from the peak.
Okay, yeah.
It's low sun. We're last race. It's low sun and it's raining. And the visor is down enough for me because I could drop my head. And if I just drop my eyes, which I often do, and I've just got that now, the dark top of the tin. And I thought, that's okay. And then it was brilliant sunshine. It had rained and the track was really glaring. So it's now the clouds are gone, the sun's out, but the track's soaking wet, and it's 5 o'clock in the evening, end of the race. And I thought, I'll try my new visor. And I pulled it down. Because it's new and I hadn't tried it, there's a little sticky pad that sticks the visor to the peak.
Yeah.
So then I had to drive with my head down a bit more, and I thought, there we go. I haven't checked. So I should have checked that before I got in the car. And that's just a simple thing that, not life-threatening, but I could have sorted that out. I think it's Jackie Stewart said there's no such thing as bad luck. You get good luck, but one of his quotes is, bad luck is poor preparation. And I thought of him, I thought that quote, I thought, there you go, Jackie Stewart.
I could have checked that, I didn't. And this is what's happened.
It's preparation, isn't it? It's about, it comes right back to the start of the conversation. It's about preparing to go racing. What can I do to prepare myself? What do I need to do? What advice can I find and take, or actually do something myself, invest in myself? What championship am I going to race in? Should that be something that's really going to stretch the budget, or something I can do comfortably? Who's coming with me? Yeah, all those questions that keep popping up. So someone walks into base and you're working with, and they think, I'm thinking of going racing, what would you recommend? The conversation always goes off in a completely different direction to what people think it's going to go. You think it's all about training, what car, what do you want to race, what tracks? Yeah. No, let's start a bit further down the road here. Who's coming with you?
Yeah.
My partner.
Why does that matter?
She doesn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, she doesn't like cars and she doesn't like racing. Okay, so you're going on your own. I haven't thought about that. Or, yeah, my family are really into it. Boys can't wait to come and see Dad race. That's completely different.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's so many things, and that is a nice little sort of loop background to the start. Yeah, I think this is probably a good point to start rounding this off.
Absolutely.
I read the book. There's so many chapters. There's so many like details. We've covered some stuff. I'd recommend people have a little gander. But yeah, thank you very much. Thanks for coming on the podcast again.
I'd love to do it again, Sam. It's a pleasure. Yes. And if I could just get one final plug for Mission Motorsport.
Go for it.
That the actual cost of the book is, I think off the top of my head, I should know this, £25. And I always think that is a sizable sum of money, but not in comparison to what you're about to do.
Yeah.
So I think you can I'm confident you can save the money it costs for you to buy the book in what you may or may not spend racing, if you think about it with a bit of guidance.
Yeah, even just that, you might take the bit of sticky stuff off your visor.
Off your visor.
You're able to see.
Exactly. But Mission Motorsport, a fantastic charity. And if you're regular to track days, you'll see them in the pits, you'll see them at races. And I will give them a plug. We're not doing it this year, but we're going to do it next year. The Race of Remembrance at Anglesey in November is a fantastically supported event. If you are a racer and you'd like to attend, it's all classes, it's different classes, but we're all out for the same time. 12 hours, starts on the Saturday around 3 or 4. Finishes at 9, so you race into the night, and then you start again at Sunday. Very odd race, because you start at, I believe, 9 o'clock. In fact, I've done it before twice. You start at 9, you stop at 10:30.
Right.
All the cars on the straight. There's a remembrance service because it's done on Remembrance weekend, which can be very emotional because you've got people there relaying their life in the services and what might have happened to them, and all their experiences. And then after around about 20 minutes, you all get back in your car and you carry on racing. I was the one that, out of the team of us, I think there was 4 of us, there was a gentleman there who'd been seriously injured in conflict.
Yeah.
And he gave a very moving story about his life. And crikey, I had tears in my eyes. Then I got back in the car. I'm sitting there. I've never experienced this before. I'm sitting here full of emotion for all very different reasons.
20, 19, 18.
Exactly. And then off you go and you race until the afternoon. So it's 12 hours. It's a beautiful, beautiful event. And it's a little bit more than a motor race. And anybody that does it always says the same thing. It really is fantastic and a very supporting thing to do. So Mission Motorsport are getting, basically, once we start the process of writing it, if you buy it from Amazon, they take a fair chunk, obviously, to prepare it and print it and send it out. But all the proceeds that are left all go, with both books, all go to Mission Motorsport. So
Nice.
Not only are you reading about how to start racing or track days, you are giving money to a very good cause.
Yeah. And I only hear amazing things about what Mission Motorsport do. And that weekend sound like everyone says it's great.
Yeah, thank you.